Welcome back, legends. Today, we're diving into something that may be silently stressing you out as a business owner, as a high performer, as a leader, decision-making. When we get stuck in overthinking, or even outsourcing our decisions, we end up giving away our power. So to help you break this cycle and become more decisive, we're going to explore a powerful tool for making clear, empowered choices and how to trust yourself making them. So welcome, Nick. Mate, as someone who's coached hundreds of high-performing men in your time, what would you say are some of the biggest obstacles that guys face when it comes to decision-making?
I think it's really easy to get bogged down when you are so used to carrying this massive weight of just expectation and a certain ideal level of performance. And I've found it personally, I've seen it time and time again, gets to a point where you're so dissociated from everything that you need to do that it's really difficult to make a gut or viscerally supported decision in your system. And it's a dance between, obviously, if you have a family or you're running a business, or there's certain career opportunities, or it's a thing of you're stuck in a position where there's just so many different asks of you. And it's where do I start? How do I start with this if I don't even feel like I'm able to make a decision for myself, let alone for everything else at this moment in time? I find that that's normally the seesaw where people are, or the fulcrum where people are tilting either to the one side where I just want to switch off and do nothing, or on the other side where they're able to make a decision and then it cascades into the next one and the next one and the next one because they're feeling really clear and in alignment with themselves.
What do you think most guys struggle in kind of getting to that point where they can make a decision confidently?
There's a lot of different factors with the decision-making process, but I find that two of the main ones that stick out is either these guys are really fatigued and they are burnt out. So to expect someone when they're not functioning at 100% to make a really good decision, I don't know about you, but when I am lacking sleep, I'm not the best person in any area of my life. It's difficult just to show up and be consistent and be clear and be mindful. What the Gen Z say now, demure. So I would say looking at that as a baseline, what is the quality of your sleep? And are you actually resting? Are you taking breaks? When those things are out of alignment and you don't have that base, it is really difficult to make a good decision. And then the second point would be decision fatigue. It's if you're having to make well over 20, 30, 40 decisions a day, there's a general deterioration in the quality of your decision making, because you're having to think for other people. And that's then a question around processes and boundaries that then comes up.
Yeah, 100%. I can definitely relate to that. I know I've been in places before where I've had just this stressful day. Obviously, coaching, there's a lot of stuff that you don't see coming up. So there's a lot of being present. There's a lot of emotional, mental bandwidth required for that. Plus with primal running a business, there's so much decision making, being the only person in that, you got to do a lot of stuff yourself. And then it gets to the end of the day. And, on the odd occasion that, we don't have something in the fridge pre-organized for dinner, Liv's like, oh, what do you want for dinner? And I'm trying to decide what I want for dinner after I've had a day a hectic, stressful day like that is the last freaking thing that I want to have to think about. And I'm I don't fucking care. You decide whatever you want, babe, we can have it. I don't know. What do you want? And then you go back and forth and you're just oh God. And you end up settling on takeaway or something like that. But yeah. It's we won't even go into the masculine and feminine, in that kind of situation. But little things like that can be so easily avoided, I found, at least anyway, those decisions that you're going to have to make. You're going to have to eat something for dinner during the day. You're going to have to wear something. There's these things that are going to have to happen every single day. And so for me, at least anyway, I know if I can pre-decide all those things the day before, the week before in planning those meals in like, cool, I know if I do this, I know what I have to wear. It's one less thing I have to worry about. And so, like you said, the more of those that at least I find that I can reduce, then the more capacity for some of those bigger decisions that I've got, because I haven't had that pre-fatigue of deciding trivial shit that doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so the next piece of the decision-making kind of complex, if we call it that, where I've seen a lot of people get stuck, and I know I get personally, is like the effect of indecision, right? It's, I don't know what to decide, so I'm just going to not decide right now. I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to kind of leave this for later or procrastinate about making it. How do you think that affects people's their own self-trust and their own confidence in themselves?
Well, if we look at just the actual practice and the mechanic of decision making, every single decision that you make is essentially you instilling a vote of confidence within inside yourself. And you're basically saying, I can do this. I'm capable of this. So your confidence does this every time you make a decision, even if it isn't the best decision, but it's the best decision that you can make at the time. But in retrospect, it wasn't. You're still building confidence within yourself because you're decisive. And I can tell you now, your life is probably moving because of the weight behind your decision-making process. But when you are unable to make a decision and you are stuck in indecision, think about it. You're not trusting yourself. You're probably either preconditioned or you stuck in a self-sabotaging pattern where you're outsourcing your power all the time, where you are waiting for someone to either make the call for you because you don't want to take accountability, ownership in any way, shape, or form for the outcome or the lack thereof when you do make a decision. And you're also not very clear on yourself. So then the next question is, do you know yourself? Do you understand yourself? Are you able to differentiate between what you're thinking logically and what you're feeling viscerally within your system, having a gut check in place? And that I find that whenever this conversation arises, especially during coaching sessions, it is a question of, well, do you actually trust yourself? And then do you know yourself enough to trust yourself?
Yeah. Which takes a hell of a lot of time and actual work to get to that point, right? From my experience, I know, because how many times, especially business owners, people in sales, stuff like that, like how many times have people heard, I just need to think about it, right? And assuming that more time will help them to make a better decision. When in reality, the only reasons that you should be putting off a decision are, one, if you don't have the adequate information to make that decision and you are actively seeking the information to clarify that optimal decision, or like you originally said, if you've just had a horrible night's sleep, you're already decision fatigued and you're going to delay this decision till tomorrow morning when you've had a restful night's sleep, you've got a clear head, you've like done all that kind of stuff, and you're in a much better frame to make a decision. Have I missed anything? Are there any other times where it would be acceptable to delay a decision being made, do you think? Of magnitude, of course.
I think each person also has a process, to be honest with you. So taking into account human design, which I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today, but essentially,
you sure we've got 14 minutes? Surely you can wrap it up in that much, bro.
I'm sure we can do it in 14 minutes. Yeah, just explain like a lifetime's worth of work of some other dude. No, so essentially, every person interprets and synthesizes information differently. And some people are able to make a decision on the fly. There's a very clear whisper in human design. You call it one has a splenic response, essentially. So your spleen is kind of like your intuition in the terminology of human design. And people that have that as their like intuitive like gut check system, it's instant. So I, for one, that's how my system works. So if I am tuned in, tapped in, I don't have to wait and sit for like a day or 2 or 3. I can feel it immediately if it's a hell yes or a hell no, and I can move. For some other people, it takes a little bit of time. And this is a thing where you need to obviously know yourself. You don't necessarily need to know human design, but some people you have met, I'm pretty sure everyone listening here has met, people that can either do decisions on the fly or they need to take a day or two. And that's fine, depending on the magnitude of the decision. But does that then discount the need for being rested, for having maybe a process like we're going to run through now, or just being in a clear state of mind and knowing yourself? No, it doesn't alleviate you from that responsibility. So you might take a little bit longer, and that's fine. And that's when, if that is the case and you know yourself, well, then take a little bit of time to design the systems to mitigate the amount of decisions that you have to make on the fly if it takes you a little bit longer, and maybe have a process or a framework that can support you in your general decision-making process.
Yeah. And I think this is where this process will be super helpful, because I don't know about other people, but often if I sit on a decision too long without seeking more information, the reasons or justifications that I will come up with for making a decision either way will be based on an emotion and will be biases towards that emotion, right? To make a decision in that favor, which isn't a great way to make logical decisions either. Right, so we can easily get stuck in that space too. So now I want to run through this tool, man. I think this is freaking awesome. Like, you introduced me to this, so I want you to take the lead on this, because I think this is super valuable for helping guys to, especially business owners and high-performing guys that are very logic-driven, that like to have a process to be able to cut out the crap, distinguish between those emotional biases and like actual, I guess, logic in getting to where they want to go, both in their personal life and in business as well. So how do we start? We've got a decision to make. What's the first thing we need to do?
Okay, great. So we've got to give it a title, Harry. You can't just jump in there. You always have to give this a title. This is,
what are we going to call this thing?
This is the decision matrix.
The matrix.
The matrix. So the idea of this tool is to just help you take out the guesswork when you are making decisions and just replace it with a structure. So it's a system that gives you clarity. It allows you to, weigh up the different options objectively, and then letting you also tune into what feels most aligned with your long-term goals and your value system. So I'm going to start off with the first bit, and then we can alternate as we move through. So the first one is obviously defining your decision objective. So let's say now you're just about to, you recognize that something's come up in your space, you're needing to make a decision. So starting by getting clear on the outcome that you desire. So are you choosing, a different business project? Are you trying to decide the best way to support your kids? Get really specific on the ideal outcome that you'd like.
Cool. And then from there, I guess we need to figure out step number 2 is, what is the criteria for this decision? So what's important in making this decision? Like in business, that might be profitability, or it might be growth potential. It might be alignment to the core values. If it's in a personal or a family sense, it might be like time commitments, family alignment, ease, things like that. A bit of a side note as well, if you're making a big business decision that takes you away from your family, maybe run that one by the missus or the partner first, so you don't extrapolate yourself from the family for hours on end on a week, and they're like, where are you, we miss you, and you're like, oh, but I'm doing this for you guys, and they're like, yeah, but we love you and need you too, right? So not a great way to make that decision on your own. Figure out what that criteria is and how it affects the important people around you as well, right? Because having their viewpoint can be very helpful also in getting out of that emotional bias that we all get stuck in at times.
Exactly. And that's a really good point. So then it moves you to step number 3, which is essentially assigning weight for each criterion. So not every factor is going to be equal in this process. So you might, have a general focus and bias around the financial weight behind your business decisions, while your family may have a different level of priority around personal decisions. So assigning a weight for each factor. So let's say, just using a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being not critical at all, 5 being the most critical. And you would then assign it to each one of these, options that are available to you.
I love that. I love a good scoring system. And now that we've got a score for each of those, we have to compare one to the other. So this is where you rate how well each option fits each factor. So it's going to force you to look at things objectively rather than getting lost in the what ifs. So now that you've got this little scoring complex, and keep in mind, all of this is a learning curve for you personally as well. So the first time you go through this and rate some of these things, you might think, oh, well, I underrated this, overrated this, and whatever. The more you use the system, the more you can refine it, and the better ultimately you get at using the system, and consequently making decisions as well. Right. So now that we've scored each one, we've pinned each one against each other, what's the final step here?
So the last one is you're going to end up calculating those weighted scores and essentially make your decision. So finally, you're going to multiply the score with the weight of each criterion and then add these up. So the options with the highest total score is objectively the best choice or set of choices available to you. But here's where the nuance comes in. You've got to sit with yourself. So as a bonus step, I would highly invite you to, either before you've ventured into this process, you give yourself 5-10 minutes where you're quiet, where you're undisturbed, where you can be very much with yourself, especially if there's a list of things that you need to consider. And then when you get to the end of this process, because you're a lot more aligned and tuned into yourself, you can then feel which one feels like the best choice, as well as looking at the logic behind the decision that you're going to be making. So you've then ticked both of those boxes, where you're not just a robot that's made a decision. You're like, oh, this one actually feels like the right decision. And maybe there was a difference of like two points between option A and option B, but you went for option B. Wow, amazing. That felt like the better decision. So that can obviously, create the difference and make up the difference between some of the scores that are very close to one another.
Yep. 100%. And naturally, in doing that, some people, especially if you're in more of the overthinking camp, like I generally sit, then you're going to come up with, oh, but what if this or what if that? And, I'm sure everybody's looked back in decisions in the past and think, oh, you freaking idiot. You should have done this. Why didn't you do that? I love this term that one of our old coaches, Steve, used to frame for this exact situation. And he called it chronological snobbery, which is looking back on an event, basically degrading yourself, thinking what an idiot for making that decision, because you now have new information, right? If you had the information you have now when you were making that decision, well, logic says you wouldn't have made the decision. So it's a lot easier with that new information. But there's a couple of frames that have really helped me in getting over that fear of failure. And one of them has been, I guess, because one of the reasons we have fear of failure is that if I fail, then I am not good enough, that I am not worthy, that my business is no good, my product is no good, my service is no good, that like I am like this thing. And so if my actions do that, then that's a reflection of me, right? But the separation, like huge on ownership. We're not passing the buck here at all, but being able to separate the action from the self. So if that action doesn't get the result that I wanted, even though I implemented that action, it's not that I am not good enough. It's that action was not good enough for that result that I wanted. And so my implementation of that action is what I'm then going to change. And so that might seem nuanced, it might seem like delusion, whatever, but that has allowed me, at least anyway, to separate that so I don't take things so personally, and it's looking at things from a point of improvement rather than self-deprecation and bringing myself down like, oh, you freaking idiot and this and that. It's like, cool, this action was not good enough for that thing. How do we do it better next time to achieve this, or how do we learn from this, right? That's been massive for me.
No, exactly. And I think even just following through with that process, there's also then the other parts that may come up in your space when you are maybe going through this process. Is you may be used to really bouncing ideas off of people. Normally high performers really appreciate input from other people, which is great to a point. But if that is your go-to all the time, again, it comes back to what we touched on a little bit earlier, which was the trust component. So now you've got a structure where you can lean into yourself, and especially if you are a leader, well, you're taking the lead. You've taken in information from other people. You've sat with yourself. You've distilled it down. You've got your structure, and then you can make an empowered decision by yourself and own that. And one of the things that I personally struggle with, which I think that your practice would work amazingly well for, is also just perfectionism. Every decision that you make doesn't have to be perfect. Every action that you take isn't going to end up with the ideal outcome. Things are going to happen. The how is none of your business. If you're intentional, if you're tuned in, if you're trusting yourself and trusting the process after you have actioned that decision, just allow things to move and trust that it's going to turn out in the best way possible.
But making that decision, even though it may not end in the ideal outcome that you want at this point, may open another door that you don't even see, another option that you don't even see on the table right now, which is that next ideal. But you can't see it right now because you don't have the information or the decision or the experience to be able to access it yet. Right. So at the end of the day, guys, the goal of this matrix is to help you reclaim your confidence so you can stop letting indecision hold you back. So with the decision matrix, you can take control, trust your choices, and be able to move forward with certainty and clarity. But remember, every decision, every action is a powerful vote for your vision, for your confidence, so that you can get better at using the matrix, at trusting yourself as well. So this tool is going to be available in the show notes below, or reach out to us on any of the social media platforms that you have us so that we can give you access to that and start using this for yourself. Any closing thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, just, when you do use a tool like this, or if you're giving this a go, and hopefully you are, refine it to your needs. So this could be something where you might have a little notebook and you might have a couple of basic decisions, and let's say you're sitting on a Sunday and you're trying to plan your week and you've got this massive to-do list. This can be part of that process. And it doesn't need to be massive. It can just be short and sweet. You can sit there, take a couple of notes. Oh, this actually feels like this is weighted a lot more. This feels like the right decision. Test it out at the start of your week and just notice the difference between having a clear set of decisions versus, flailing at the wayside and wondering and pondering and getting stuck in your head. One last thing I just wanted to mention: if you are having to make more than 6 decisions every single day, decision fatigue is something that needs to be accounted for. So if you're making more than 6 decisions on a day-to-day basis, then it's a question about systems and outsourcing. So learn to prioritize what needs a decision, and the things that are needing to be automated. Maybe there might be an A option or a B alternative, depending on the situation. And there's a lot of things that can fall into that category.
100%, man. So I think especially if you're in the position of owning a business, having a team around you, being able to use some of those people to make some of those decisions, which don't need to be made specifically by you or just by you, can take a huge load off that as well. Also, knowing your own personal history of when do you make the best decisions? Is it first thing in the morning after a great night's sleep and you've just had your coffee before you've opened emails and you're responsive to anything else in the day? Personally, that's a great time for me to do anything that I need a clear, level-headed brain for, so that I'm not influenced and reactive to the day and to the life. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Let's wrap it up there. Remember, clarity and confidence in your choices isn't a skill that some people are born with and not everyone else is. They're habits and traits that you can build, that you can learn yourself. If you use this matrix, if you stick to it, if you work on it, use it to your advantage, because that's what it's there for. So if you're feeling empowered, if this was helpful, please share this with someone that has a few big decisions to make, or any other business owners that you know, someone that could use a boost in their decision-making confidence as well. So guys, See you next time as we dive deeper into more strategies that can help you take charge, cut through the noise, and live life on your own terms. And until then, stay strong, stay focused, and trust your gut. Bye.